All right, section 3.2. Overall question: why did the League of Nations fail to keep peace in the 1930s? Now, if you paid half attention in the last section, we really did not mention the League doing anything when Germany, Hitler, Italy, Mussolini, Japan, Tojo really did anything. And that's kind of how it was. Now, I can pretty much end the chapter right there because, I mean, the League of Nations does not really take any legitimate action because the answer is they really don't do anything. But, of course, it got to yap about why they don't do anything and the implications of that. So this one should not be too long. Anyways, League's goal was collective security, keeping peace after World War I. Actions of Germany, Italy, Japan during the 30s are pretty much anything but peace. Now, we started to get into Germany in the previous section, obvious violations of the Treaty of Versailles and responses by France and Britain and, of course, the Soviets. But the Leagues organized the World Disarmament Conference in 1932. That didn't really do anything. A bunch of problems came up that winds up undermining this disarmament efforts from the start of the 1930s. First, most obvious, Great Depression. Economic depression threatens revolutions all around Europe, all around the world, really. Obviously, countries do not want to fall to extremist ideologies. They want to maintain their armaments. They also want to make sure they're prepared to fight. The whole point of the disarmament conference was disarmament. Countries want to maintain their armaments. Two, Japan. Japanese invasion of Manchuria, China, 1931. We'll get into that in a moment. And also, Hitler coming to power in Germany is going to be a big one. Now, back to Japan. After Japan invades Manchuria, which is part of China, Hitler starts making his own demands. He's going to start to point out that Germany had disarmed to the levels prescribed by the Treaty of Versailles, but really no other European nation had. Since no one else disarms, Germany says, well, they can't defend itself. Now, to the disarmament discussion, this actually kind of seems reasonable. Hitler wants everyone to be treated fairly. Now, France, obviously, this rings alarm bells. France is still a major threat from Germany, so they are going to refuse to disarm or negotiate. Now, due to this, Hitler is going to take Germany out of the World Disarmament Conference and the League of Nations that they wound up joining after Locarno. Hitler presents a very biased take that attempts to justify and rationalize Hitler's decision to the departure of the League of Nations. He claims that Germany supported the League more enthusiastically than any other nation. That's obviously not true. He also implies that Germany accepted the diktat. Remember the conditions of the Treaty of Versailles, which Germany swore to accept because of their support of the League of Nations, but it only signed it because they really had no other choice. Remember, they hated the Treaty of Versailles, disliked the League of Nations. He also suggests that because of the forced reduction of Germany's military, that Germany is vulnerable to attack, which would kind of be true if they didn't rearm, even though there really wasn't any interest by any other nation of going to war. He's going to claim that World War One, really German people didn't want it. This disputes the Wargo Clause. Remember, the League's goal was to keep peace. The country leaving the League definitely is kind of a signal there's about to be some well, not peace. Anyway, Germany leaves the League, Japan leaves the League as well. Now, both of them are committed to rearming. Germany, obviously, in the violation of the Treaty of Versailles, and Japan also in the violation of the Washington Naval Conference. Seeing this as a threat, other nations, they're going to increase their armaments as well, and World Disarmament Conference winds up failing miserably. Disarmament Conference fails miserably. League of Nations, remember, their goal is to maintain collective security, peace. Now, with all these nations rearming and affirming their commitments to rearm, well, this is very obviously not peace. So League of Nations is not doing its job there. Back to Japan. A bit more about Manchuria. Japan is going to invade Manchuria, which again is part of China in 1931. We get more into this in chapter 4, but for the purpose of this, at the moment, Japan is still part of the League of Nations, and China is going to appeal to the League, trying to figure out what to do, because obviously Japan invading Manchuria is not peace. So the League winds up ordering Japan to get out of Manchuria, which Japan spectacularly ignores. League is then going to form a commission to investigate the claims of China and Japan, and the commission is going to consist of Britain, Italy, France, and the United States of America, who's going to emerge from isolationism real quick to join this investigation because they see a bit of a threat to their trade. So while the investigation continues, Japan continues their own invasion in 1932. They're going to fully take over Manchuria and rename it Manchukuo. Anyways, report finishes and places the blame on both China and Japan, but once again recommends Manchuria be returned to China, and the League accepts this decision with the only dissenting vote belonging to Japan. Now, Japan again refuses to accept this decision and continues its occupation anyway. League's own rules at this point say that they should have taken some sort of action against Japan, but they didn't. Why? Well, it's the same reason as we've already discussed. Great Depression is still going on. Countries can't afford to take any action, especially Britain, especially France, and keep in mind that the League doesn't actually have a standing army. Their army would be kind of donated by other nations to go fight. Neither was really prepared to take any action, especially go to war. So without the support of the two most powerful nations, the League does not do anything. So that's Japan. Moving on to Italy, same or at least similar situation occurs when Italy invades Abyssinia. That's modern day Ethiopia. Italy's going to invade Abyssinia in 1935, and Abyssinia had been a member of the League since 1923. Italy invades, and Abyssinia is going to appeal to the League. Very obvious situation here. Powerful member of the League blatantly violates the League's covenant, and then takes aggressive action against another member that is weaker. So League unanimously condemns the actions of Italy, and then they discuss how to attempt to force Italy to withdraw. However, same thing, Britain and France again have no interest in getting involved in conflict, again for a couple reasons. Obviously, Great Depression going on, still in effect, can't afford it, don't really want to. Now, beyond that though, Italy is an ally to Britain and France against Hitler. Remember, stress a front. Mussolini had also implied that Italy was ready to go to war against any country who opposed them. Now, were they actually? Well, to be determined. Britain and France, they're also not prepared for war, even less ready to go to war on behalf of a faraway African country whose independence is of like zero interest to them. And Mussolini kind of suggests that there's really not any difference between Italy going to Abyssinia and European nations imperializing Africa not all that long ago. So Britain and France, they have a dilemma. They want to keep their commitment to the League of Nations, but also at the same time, they do not want to damage their relationship with Italy. So what is their solution? Well, their solution is very obvious. Engage in secret diplomacy. Yeah, that thing that Woodrow Wilson didn't want. Remember from the 14 points? Remember those? Oh yeah. Outwardly, Britain and France, they support the League's decision telling Italy to leave. However, really though, what they do is they put into the Orleval Pact. The Orleval Pact was the result of secret diplomacy and also a mixture of France and Britain not wanting to go to war. So the end result is the Orleval Pact. Orleval Pact proposes divvying up Abyssinia in a way that pretty much gives Mussolini exactly what he wanted. So when news drops of the Orleval Pact, the public is going to hate it, right? That's just the people. Also, members of the League are going to hate it too. So it's pretty hypocritical, right? That Italy gets to invade Abyssinia and then get rewarded. Based on the reaction, Britain and France are then going to throw it out because it's really seen as a betrayal of the League and pretty much the event that's going to wind up killing it. Mussolini is going to take Italy out of the League and then wind up getting closer with Hitler. And, if you think about it, this pretty much went about exactly as you would expect it based off of what we know. Britain and France wanted to avoid war, so they gave in to Italy's demands to do it. But realistically, the two most powerful European nations going to war over an African country that they don't really care about is not a good move, especially during the Great Depression, but they were all members of the League of Nations. France kind of wanted to make a move, but not without Britain, and with Britain's Anglo-German naval agreement effectively saying that the Paris Peace Conference agreements were all fair game at this point, French don't really see Britain as a viable ally at this point to take action. Britain also views France as weak, which they are, and nothing is going to really get accomplished here. All right, jumping from Italy back to Spain for a bit, the League of Nations during the Spanish Civil War is going to take up a non-intervention position. Remember, the non-intervention committee consisted of a bunch of different nations like Britain and France and, also Germany and Italy, the countries that were intervening in the Spanish Civil War. Anyway, League is going to take this position as the original covenant, remember the agreement of the League of Nations, says that members can't interfere with the internal affairs of other members. Since the Spanish conflict is going to be perceived as a civil war, an internal matter, covenant rules apply, and the non-intervention committee, well, that's the way they wind up going. Now, it's obviously known that Germany and Italy were violating this. I mean, since that was occurring under the League's own rules, it was technically supposed to step in. You can't really hide tens of thousands of Italian troops rushing into Spain to Franco's aid. Now, does the League of Nations do anything? Do they step in? Well, absolutely not. They said that there wasn't enough evidence that Germany and Italy were involved, even though, again, there are soldiers and weapons from Italy and Germany on Franco's side, and even German weapons on the side of the opposition. But of course, most powerful member of the League, Britain and France, they do not want to go to war. Last place League could have intervened for now was China. Again, with Imperial Japan. 1937, Japan begins a full-scale invasion of China after taking Manchuria. In the early 1930s, China appeals to the League again. Remember, they did nothing last time back in the early 30s, and again, the League offers no assistance. Now, reasoning is going to be similar to what we've heard. Britain and France, heavily impacted by the Great Depression, in no position to sanction Japan or go to war with it. Japan is going to have left the League of Nations. They're going to have formed an alliance with Germany in the year prior in 36. The only way to force Japan out of China would have been to take military action, which, again, they did not want to do because of the impacts of the Great Depression. But also, now that Japan is allied with Germany, you would effectively be declaring a war against both of them, which, again, they don't want to do. So during the 1930s, League is going to fail to deal with actions done by Hitler in Germany, Mussolini in Italy, and Tojo in Japan. Britain and France, they're bent on continuing the policy of appeasement. Appeasement is the policy of giving into the demands of an aggressor in order to avoid conflict. Every time an aggressor nation took action that probably should have been stopped, appeasement was used as a justification to avoid conflict. For the League to have actually been effective, it probably would have needed the full commitment of its members, which it barely had. During the 30s, major nations become less committed, countries come and go. Therefore, the League really is not able to respond effectively to aggression. Keep in mind, the League needs unanimous decisions and also doesn't have a standing army. Between all this, the League wasn't really able to respond effectively. Lack of commitment did not help. Italy was never full committed all the way back to the Corfu incident. Remember, Italy invaded Corfu, and then the League told Italy to get out. Instead, Italy is going to appeal to the Castle of Ambassadors, which winds up siding with Italy over Corfu. And after this, obviously, Italy is going to leave after the invasion of Abyssinia, and the League goes against Italy again. Hitler has always been critical of the League of Nations. Remember, it's created by the unpopular Treaty of Versailles, and Hitler deemed it as a method of Britain and France to keep maintaining a bit of power over Germany, a bit of influence over Germany. Germany is going to join the League in 1926 after the Locarno Conference, again after reaffirming their commitment to the Treaty of Versailles, which Hitler hated, and he's going to withdraw after the failure of the World Disarmament Conference in 1933. Japan seemed kind of committed. While they had a democratic-style-ish government, when support for democracy collapsed, military dictatorship viewed membership of the League as pretty much unuseful for their own expansion and ambitions. League is going to rule against Japan when invading Manchuria, and then Japan is going to withdraw anyway. Soviet Union, they were always seen as highly suspect due to being communist. The League was established at the Paris Peace Conference. There was no Russian presence. They dropped out of World War I. Russia was actually prohibited from joining for a while. Soviet Union saw the League as a way to keep the USSR isolated from other countries, but circumstances are going to change by the mid-30s when Germany and Italy and Japan had all left. So the USSR, they sought membership in 1935, and they actually joined and became a permanent member of the Council. They remained critical of the League the whole time, though, especially when it failed to maintain collective security in ways that obviously threatened the Soviet Union. USA never joins. They rejected the Treaty of Versailles. They returned to isolationism, and given that the most powerful nation of the world did not join, this is obviously going to hurt their chances at being successful. Since the USA doesn't join, that title of most powerful nations of the League is going to wind up going to Britain and France. They're going to take up the mantle and try to fill the shoes of the U.S., but to be honest, as time went on, they saw the League as a burden. They wind up involved in the League when it becomes a conflict to their own interests. They are determined to avoid war, right? There's suffering going on from the Great Depression. Britain and France wind up withholding resources from the League, and they're reluctant to send their military to assist. This leads to the League failing to confront pretty much most acts of aggression and made most of the members mad. The smaller nations, they had joined in hopes that collective security would obviously secure them. However, that was never going to happen. Like, for example, Abyssinia. 1930s really fully exposed the weakness of the League of Nations. They really did nothing to prevent the violations of the Treaty of Versailles and also any other aggression that took place. That's pretty much it for the section. Now, back to that overall question, why did the League of Nations fail to keep peace in the 1930s? Well, for the most part, This starts with the failure of disarmament. Countries did not want to disarm. Powerful nations, they're not committed. They come and go. They're not willing to actually throw their hat into the ring and uphold the League's covenant. Britain and France, they don't want to go to war. Great Depression hinders them and also other nations as well. And aggressor nations like Germany, like Italy and Japan, they were kind of given free reign. The League does not really have any ability to uphold peace. And with that, Germany, Italy, Japan, they see the weakness of the League, they see the weakness of France, and the unwillingness to go to war from Britain, and they think that the world is their playground. That is going to be it for section 3.2. Up next is section 3.3.